It's time to start building our cell builder colonies. We are getting started a couple weeks later than we normally do in the past years, but this cold weather just seems like it's kind of set everything back a little bit. And honestly, I think if we just wait a couple more weeks, we're going to end up with better quality mated queens. There's just going to be a lot more drones in the area. So I know a lot of people have been chomping at the bit for us to kind of get queens up and running, but I think if we just are just a little more patient, I mean, even just another week or two, I think it makes a better quality. So we're starting here. It's March 1st, and I think it's going to be a better result anyways. These are some of the builders we left behind that we didn't send to California. They're going to need a lot of juicing up. I popped a few lids. Some of them are still pretty on the weak side, so we'll be pulling brood from some of the support colonies to build up the main grafting colonies, which we're going to run double deep Cloake boards in it this year, just like we did last spring. I had really good results with it, and that should go pretty good. We'll rebuild them today, and then we'll graft tomorrow, and I'll try to film that as we're doing it. A lot of people have been asking how we do Cloake boards. We really don't do anything fancy. We don't do the blocking the entrance and reversing and all that mess. We keep it pretty simple. I like Cloake boards because, in my opinion, it's the most simple method and cheapest method to raise cells. And hopefully we can start getting a good take, and we can start having queens come out here in, I'm thinking in about 6 weeks, we should have our first queens we're going to be caging around mid-April. We just started opening the website up for reservations, and we're already starting to get pre-orders in. So if anybody needs mated queens, go ahead and get on the list, because I'm sure we're going to get backed up well into summer here in a short period of time. But in the meantime, I'll show you guys how we start the cell process, and this is the beginning of the entire queen process. One thing I'm really excited about this year that we didn't have last year is we finally bought a shaker box. I did make a homemade one last year out of a deep box and some hardware cloth, but we went ahead and bought this from Greg's Heating and AC. Every time we got online and we're looking for reviews for these things, this company came up over and over and over again. Everyone seemed to really love them, and I have to say it's just really well made. It just got in the mail yesterday. I've never used a proper one before, but it seems pretty simple. Just you got a queen excluder where you're going to shake your frames. Seems like the bees are just going to fall down from this funnel in here into the cage box, and it's kind of cool. This top part will actually detach, and when it comes off, it's hard to see here, but it's got these two little doors that kind of flap down like a trap door, and when you pull the top part off, there's a spring in those doors, and they'll flatten out, and it'll actually seal this, so you don't have to lug around this top part, which honestly is way lighter than I was expecting it to be. I don't know. I thought this thing was going to be very heavy. It's really not. It's got a couple great handles, and it seems like it's got a sliding door here. I'm assuming that's where I go in there and scoop the bees out. I'm probably going to spray them with just a little bit of thin sugar water, so they don't fight too much. Last year I just did water and it was fine. I always get scared doing sugar water because sometimes you can trigger robbing when there's not a nectar flow, because there's not one on right now. But if it gets bad, we'll just swap back to water. But I think they fight a little less when you start mixing all those different bees and pheromones together with sugar water. So if we come across any additional colonies here that are really strong, but maybe don't have enough brood, or we just don't need brood to pull, we'll just shake a frame or two of nurse bees through here. I'm assuming they're going to come down here. We'll have to see. When I made mine, I had a frame of brood in the bottom box, and that would pull the nurse bees down naturally, but I don't see a frame rest on this, so I'm assuming the bees will just go down themselves. We'll kind of have to probably tinker with that, just so I can figure out how to use it. And then what I'll do is I'll take 1 cup of nurse bees and we'll dump it into one of the cell builders, and that'll boost them up. We found last year that even adding just like 1 cup of nurse bees to a cell builder like this, we were getting anywhere between 10, 20, 30, sometimes even 40% increase on our grafts for that week, depending on how weak the colony was. And sometimes adding the nurse bees, we got better results faster than adding frames of brood, because obviously the brood has to hatch out and those bees have to age up before they start producing queen cells. So obviously the best solution is just to add nurse bees and cap brood. That's ideal, but this gives us some other options, and I'm also going to use this to start building the mini mating nukes. As soon as I see how many cells we're going to be getting out, I'll be running out to that tie location that I had and start shaking bees into this, and then I'll bring them back here to the house. And you can't see, but we've got a bunch of pallets out there for all the 700 mini mating nukes we'll be running this year. I've been assembling them every single night. You have to snap them together. It's not hard, but it's a lot to build. So that's what I'm doing every night right now. And then we still need to paint them before we get them out there, but still a lot to do. But I'm really excited because in my mind, this is kind of day one of the season, and we're going to get started. I've got some help coming in. There's our Cloake boards. I've got some help coming in here shortly, and I got one guy who wants to see how we do it. I'm going to teach him, and then we were able to hire an employee to help us out this year, so she's going to be helping us graft. Really pumped with that, and kind of looking almost to hire someone else too to help us run all those mating nukes, because I've just got so much to do. And all that extra semi gave us a lot of options this year, and I'm really grateful for it. So be happy to have a little help, and happy to see how the shaker block works out, and we'll get to it here in just a minute. All right, we're getting started. We are converting these over, these double deeps here, with putting the Cloake board in between. We've got the slide in between here, so they're sealed off. What we're doing is we're putting in these thumbtacks, and that's just a marker for us to come back and either add some cat brood, or we're going to shake some bees in that new shaker box we just got and come back and add them to boost them up. They're a little bit weak. So we've just slowly been working through. We're going to get our 16 ready. We're trying out these little queen cage grabbers we got this year too, to put the queen in there so we don't have to worry about her running off. We had a problem with that last year. And we're marking all the queens with last year's color, which is green, because these are all last year's queens. We will requeen them as soon as we get a new batch in. And we've got some hive and a halves here. We're converting over to double deeps. It's kind of a pain, but I want everything to be double deeps, and these hive and a halves are in pretty good shape. So we're gonna just throw an excluder in between there. We got some help this week. We got Reed and Jeff, and they're from Alabama. They're coming to see how we do the Cloake board system. We got Rachel's over here. She's helping us. She's gonna be running it mostly. Hopefully I don't have to do any work this year with the cells. So let's see if anybody's got any hives open. We don't yet. So here's what she's doing. What we're all doing is we're pulling out frames of cat brood as much as we can get, and we're pulling them up in the top box here. I want this top box to be basically 1 or 2 frames of honey, the best frame of pollen we can have, and the pollen frame will be right next to where our grafts are going to be, and the rest are going to be all solid cat brood. We're going to make sure we find the queen, we mark her, we put her down in that bottom box. Obviously we don't want her up there with the grafts. If we find any open brood like eggs and larvae, we're going to put them down in the bottom box. And normally what would happen is these bees would drift down in the bottom box towards the open brood, but if you put your slide in as you're doing the Cloake board and you put everything back together, it'll stop those nurse bees from going down. And that's why, because some people will tell you to put the open brood in the top box and then shake it off and then move it back. We don't do that. It's a lot of extra stuff. We just put the Cloake board on with the slide, keeps all your nurse bees locked up in there, and then we'll come back with all of our sport colonies out over here, and we'll pull a cat brood, probably gonna shake bees, whatever we gotta do to juice these things up, because we want them absolutely full. All right, we got all the cell builders. We got 16 ready to go. We've got, mostly it's all cat brood up here. We've got a frame or 2 of honey on the outside. We got a frame of pollen right around where the grafts are gonna be. We're leaving a space for the morning, so we're gonna put the grafts in, but the rest should mostly all be cat brood. We had extra cat brood, so we should have plenty. We got the slides in already, so tomorrow morning we want to graft. This top box will be in a fully queenless state. Queens down there, we don't rotate, we don't block the entrance, I don't bother with it. And all the queens are marked, so it'll be easy to find them when we rebuild this in the next week or 2. What we'll have to do before we put the grafts in the morning, we'll have to check all these frames, unfortunately, shake all the bees off, cut the cells off, because they're going to try to start raising their own cells, because these bees are very quickly going to be in a queenless state. So what we're doing now is we're popping all the lids just to see what the populations look like, and you can see they're pretty varied on the amount of bees in each box. And what we're going to do is we shook a lot of extra nurse bees in that new shaker box we got, and we're going to add those to these boxes. Like that one probably doesn't need any. That's kind of what you want to see. You want to see a full coverage of bees. They look really good. We'll probably give them a little bit of extra bees anyways, because why not? We'll juice them up. The only reason we've got these kind of triples here is just so there's some brood in these mediums. They were old hive and a halves. We'll let that brood hatch out. I'll take that away in the next couple of weeks when the brood's gone, break them back down into double deeps. And here's a shaker box. We got a good, first time using this thing, we got a good chunk of bees in here. And I was worried about them getting overheated, but they seem to be okay. But it's slammed full of nurse bees. And we're going to try to get them out of here. Yeah, I think what you do, just stand it up like this. And shake them down. And we should be able to do that. And then I'll give them a little more sugar water. Keep them from flying. Easier to scoop too if they're a little sticky. Grab a cup. Any of these old foragers should fly back to their old colonies, so whatever's left of here, these. If you will, just leave the lids off, and because if we have extra, I'm going to still give it to the weak ones. We'll try to equalize so they all have high populations, equal populations. Go pretty far. We found out last year that just even adding 1 cup of nurse bees can like skyrocket your grafting rates if they're weak. We'd see an increase anywhere between 10 and 40% on our grafts if the hives are weak, just by adding this extra cup. So it's really worth the effort, because although we add a lot of brood, the brood takes time to hatch, and it takes time for the nurse bees to age up. But this is like a little shortcut version to juicing them up so we can get some good grafts going tomorrow. That's it. I'm just going to spread the rest. Oh, that's okay. Yep, that's it. We're just gonna spread the rest. There's a few bees left, a few more cups. I'll spread them around so all the boxes are slam full. We want 10 solid frames of bees in them. And if we get them all about equal population, we should have a fairly equal amount of our graft percentage going on. So we don't have one hive making 5 cells, one hive making 40 cells. We want to consistently get all the cells from all the hives would be ideal. And that's about it. And then we'll do the rest in the morning. I was able to get all the bees out of this container here, except for just a little bit. And there's probably only a couple of cups of bees. Couldn't really get them out without squishing them. Maybe there's a technique, but I opened this sliding trap door here. They have this thing here that kind of goes up and down. And I'm hoping they'll crawl in the hive there. I'm sure there's a method to using this thing, but man, I mean, just me using it for the very first time, it sure was nice, because my old box couldn't have handled that many bees. It would have, my homemade one, they would have heated and got crushed. I mean, you can see here, I mean, I honestly don't see any dead bees, really. Every one of them's alive, and they're looking good. So I'm real happy. And they were in the sun today, and it was pretty hot. I was afraid they'd overheat, but they sure didn't. I'm really enjoying this thing. And I just wish I could figure out how to get that last little bit of bees out of there, but this is going to be great when I start building the minis here soon. Okay, this is the day after we rebuilt the hives, so we're coming back and going through them. What we're doing today, we're pulling out every single frame, shaking the bees off, and checking to see if the bees have started raising their own cells from the larvae that were on there. Because even though you try to only put cat brood in the top box, in reality, you're always going to have some eggs and larvae on the frame. You just kind of have to deal with it. So if we cut all those cells they're making off, it'll make them more likely to draw our grafts that we're going to put in today. We're also kind of double checking the hives to make sure the populations are good. Like that population's not as good as I want. This one's okay. I would say, to me, this one's kind of the minimum. It'll look better in the next week or two once all that brood hatches out. But I want to make sure a lot of those bees that I shook in yesterday have stayed. The nurse bees will stay, but the older forager bees will just fly back to the parent colony. So you'll still get some population drifting and mixing around a little bit. So it's always good to look the next day to see how the hives are. Just because you build them right yesterday doesn't mean they're going to be right today. That's just not how it works. So we're still doing some fine-tuning stuff. Like what I found with this hive here, you see I removed these back frames because this hive had too much honey, and it had a frame of empty comb for some reason, which there's no need to have any empty comb in the top box because there's no queen up here. You want this thing to maximize all the resources that it can hold. What I'm looking for like a frame of honey on the outside, on both outsides. That'll create that creates like insulation for the bee. They really don't need it because I'm feeding the bees right now, but it just creates insulation because it's still pretty cold, and we're having to wear jackets today. We got another cold snap. So this kind of just acts as insulation for your walls. And then I'm going to have 3 frames of brood. I always leave a slot right here for the grafts. I always do the 5th slot just because it's a little closer to me when I'm trying to pull it out with the hive tool, and I know right away where the grafts are. If I always put it in the 5th position, don't have to do that. That's just the way I do it. And then I got a frame of pollen right next to the grafts. I just put 1 frame of pollen is fine. Bee bread's really nice if you find one. And then I'll just keep going brood all the way until I get to back here, which I'll put the honey. So you're only going to have 9 frames in a 10 frame box. 3 of those frames are going to be feed. So one pollen, 2 honey, and then the additional 6 frames, if I did it, yeah, 6 if I did my math right, will be ideally cat brood. Although of course you always have a little open brood. It's just the way it goes. So this one needs another frame of honey, and it needs another couple frames of cat brood, which we'll get. I haven't gone through this one yet, but that one looks kind of okay. But you have to go through every single frame, and even if you think there's like a honey frame here or a pollen frame there, you still need to check it, because there could still just be a stray egg, and that one stray egg can hatch. And when you have that virgin running around one day when you're grafting, she's going to annihilate all your cells. So it's tedious, but you have to pick every frame up too and shake the bees off. You don't want to just pull the frame up with the bees on it and try to look it over, because they'll be covering up a cell, especially when that cell's only like today, where it's probably only 24 hours old. You may just miss it. So you just shake every single frame, or if you prefer to use the bee brush, that's fine. We shake, it's just faster and easier, but that's really important. Every single frame, you can't skip anything. It just takes one rogue queen to destroy a whole week of work, and you just can't do that. This is one of the breeder colonies we're going to be grafting off of today. See, it's got pretty slim wall-to-wall bees, so hopefully we can find, I'm sure we can find some good larvae in there, and we're going to graft. We're just about done fixing all the colonies back up, and there was a little patch up. We still had a little more brood to add, a little honey here and there, pollen, little stuff to fix. There was some empty comb you got to take out. It's always good kind of to go through them the next day and just fine tune them before you put those grafts in. And I'm going to find some larvae so we can get started. You know, I've never used these little queen cages before until now, but I got to tell you, I love it. Normally I take a frame with a queen on it and I'll lean it against the hive and she'll run off, or we'll put it in a nuke box and have to pull her back out. But this thing is just so handy. Yeah, there she goes. All right, these are 4 good frames of open brood. They're larvae that are probably right around 4 days old, best I can tell. And they're some of the best ones that I could find. It's worth to spend a little extra time to go ahead and pick out the best frames of larvae to graft from. If you just grab a frame because it's got a handful of larvae, you'll find yourself having to get up from the grafting table, come back and get more. Just get everything you need and get a little extra. We're going to do 720 grafts this morning. That's what we do every week. I usually find, you know, we'll get around 500 or 600 good usable cells from that amount. I don't expect a good take on this first batch, just because the first batch of the year is always kind of wonky. The cell builders aren't quite strong enough. All that brood we just put in's got to hatched out. Bees are stressed out from all the mixed pheromones and us tearing them apart, and it's just still pretty chilly is the main reason. But we'll get enough to make it worth it. And then usually what I find is the second week of grafting is when we'll really hit our stride. We'll start really pumping cells out on a regular basis, and the deeper we get into spring, we'll get better results. Like I would expect us to get at least a minimum 70% off grafts. That's what I shoot for. You know, some weeks we get 80, some weeks we get 90. It can vary, but as long as we're getting at least 70%, that's what I kind of budget and move the operation around on. So that should be plenty for us. What I'm doing here, because it's a little chilly and we still have to get our grafting table set up, we've got to put all the JZBZ cell cups in the bars. It's a lot of little prep work to do before we start grafting, but I wanted to go ahead and just get the larva finished. So what I'm doing is I'm leaving all the bees on top of the larva. That was from this breeder hive here that I pulled from. They're doing really, really good. She had almost 10 frames of brood, which to me is great. I would say 8 frames of brood would be average for an early spring hive. That's really strong. So 10 frames is kind of the trait I'm looking for. I'm looking for higher populations, more brood production. That's good for me when it comes to making splits and doing California. So that's kind of what we're breeding off of this year. But these bees will keep that larva warm so it doesn't get chilled. And I'll just set it out at the front of the entrance of the barn, and we'll go and we'll shake the bees off or brush them off. It doesn't really matter. And then we'll just start grafting. Okay, here's our stack of cell cup bars. We do around 15 to 20 per bar. Just honestly, it's about as many as you can fit on there. There's probably a few too many on here, I think, with the cell builders being on a little bit on the weak side, but it's okay. We'll go ahead and get them started. If they don't draw any, then they'll be in the bar for next week. We'll save some time. Should be 48 bars. Again, we shoot for usually at least 15 cups per bar. Sometimes we can get upwards of 20. So we actually may do over 720 grafts today. And we've got 3 people grafting, so that's 16 bars per person. And that's not too bad at all. Should be hopefully pretty short work. Here's one of the grafting stations here. See, we get a little magnifying glass. It's got a light in it if you need it. And then you can't really see here, but all that around there is young larvae. You got your cat brood, older larvae on the outside, and as we get on the outskirts, that's going to be our nice young larvae we're going to graft from. Got your cell bar there. Chinese grafting tool, that's the way to go. I was going to say too, actually, I forgot to order more of these cell cups. So thankfully, we have a bunch of old ones that we're using. I usually keep, buckets of these things lying around. These are 5-gallon buckets. They're slam full of old cell cups we've used before. I know some people like to say you've got to boil the cups if they're old, or you got to put them in a beehive, so the bees clean them up. You don't have to do any of that. We used to go through all that mess. If you get new cell cups, you can take them right out of the package and graft in them. They'll be fine. You can take cell cups that's been in the barn for 5 years, and as long as it's enough room for you just to drop that larva, they're going to do the same thing. There's no need to do all those extra steps. You don't need to prime them with royal jelly or yogurt or distilled water or whatever crazy stuff people are doing. Just scoop up a larva and put them in a cell cup and then put them in a queenless colony, and that's all there is to it. There's no need for all those extra steps. It doesn't make any difference, not in my opinion, not in my experience. So here's a really simple grafting setup. It's just a table. You got your empty bars. One thing we learned last year, it really helps, is if you'll number if you're doing multiple cell builders, number the frame. So this is number 15. So when we take these cells in there and we obviously we're going to put 3 bars, it'll be 45 or so grafts per this frame. I've also numbered all the Cloake boards. So there's a number 15 Cloake board, and this number 15 frame will go in with the number 15 Cloake board cell builder. That way when we pull these things out next week, usually what we'll do is we'll just pull a bunch of the grafts out. And, if there's a problem, sometimes we spot it as we're pulling the grafts out. But sometimes, you just overlook something. And if you've numbered these and you start seeing a problem when you come back in here to pull the cells out to put them in the incubator, you can trace whatever your grafts were back to the hive they came from. When you have a lot of cell builders, all these different cells and grafts can just get all kind of jumbled and mixed around, and you'll go, oh man, maybe you found like a few eggs in some of the cell cups, so you know that a queen somehow got up in the top of your cell builder where your grafts are. You, instead of having to go back and check every single frame and look for probably a queen or something, a small young queen, in our case in 16 colonies, I can just see that there were maybe some eggs in the cell cups in frame number 15. So I know immediately to go check hive number 15, and that will save you so much work and such a headache if you're doing multiple cell builders. If you've got 1 or 2 cell builders, it's not a problem. But for us, and you've got, labor and stuff and people doing everything, it really helps to keep track of every single hive and where they come from. And like the other stand there, we had that fancy kind of, that stand for the frame there. You don't need that. All I do is I take like a 4x4 block or a brick or something that's just fine to lean the frame against. You really don't need anything fancy. You just need a table, some grafting tools. You definitely want a light. LED's light is better, just so the larvae don't get too heated up. And that's it. And another thing we don't bother with that I know a lot of people are kind of arguing about it all the time, but we don't cover up our grafts after we graft. We'll graft, and then I'll just move them off to that side of the table. That in the way I know they're done. I don't use a towel. I don't use a damp rag. We're literally just in a barn outside. It's not insulated. It's not heated. Nothing. And they do just fine. At least in Florida, the humidity here is so high, even in kind of early winter like this, the larvae are not going to dry out. I mean, if you left them out for an hour, maybe. But to kind of offset even the risk of them going out or drying out is what I'll do is as soon as we get a full frame's worth of grafts or 2 frames, depending how long it takes to graft, we just immediately go put them in the cell builders. The faster you put those larvae in your cups, you stick them in the frame, and you put them in the cell builders, the better. You're going to get better results, but there's no need to add the towel and all that stuff. I don't find it necessary at all. They'll do just fine just this way. That's really all you need. That's your basic setup for making queen cells. Everything extra is just extra, and in my opinion is not really worthwhile. Okay, so here's one of the cell builders. I'm about to put the first set of grafts in. Got your 3 bars there. See, I've got number 15, frame number 15, and then I just write 15 on the Cloake board there. I've already got the metal slide in there. Remember, we put those in yesterday when we were rebuilding these cell builders. So this hive has been basically in a queenless state for 24 hours because the queen is in the bottom box and her pheromones can't get up through, or the bees also can't get up through that metal slide. So these bees up here think they're queenless. So all I'm going to do is just put, oh, somebody didn't put the frames exactly like I like, but that's okay. I'm going to just put that thing down in there, and what's going to happen, hopefully they'll get to work on these grafts right away. Start building us a few cells. And what I'll do is I'll come out in the morning, and all I'm going to do is just take that metal slide and just slide it on out of there. And there, you know, there's a queen excluder underneath that metal slide. That's what the Cloake board is. It's just a queen excluder with a little metal slide that comes in and out. And when I pull that slide out in the morning, the pheromones from that queen, as well as the worker bees that are carrying her pheromone, will go up with that top box, but the queen will stay down there. She can't get through the queen excluder, right? So these bees will now become queen right, and the hive will reunite, and they'll be just fine. They won't fight. All will be well. And that will trigger the supersedure queen cell response, which will result in a higher quality queen cell than what they're doing now. Now they're just going to be doing an emergency queen cell because they think they don't have a queen. So, but they'll make a bunch of cells. That's what they do in the emergency state. But the cool thing is when the hive becomes queen right again and starts the supersedure queen cell response, all of the queen cells that have been started today will be finished. Once the bees start a cell, they'll finish a cell as long as they can. But they'll finish the rest of the cell under the supersedure response, which is a lot more calm. The cells are going to be larger. They're going to have more royal jelly. And you're just going to get better quality queens. That's why I love these Cloake boards. And you can do this too if you have a queenless, like a queenless colony. You put your grafts in for a day and then you move them into a queen right colony like this. It's basically the same thing. It's just the Cloake board allows you to have just one good double deep hive. And you can still have it queen right too, and you don't have to dump so much brood and everything, right? It's going to generate its own brood, generating its own bees. You just need to have some support colonies to help keep it up to snuff. But technically, if you had a really good queen and you were in a good state during the spring, this thing could generate all the resources it needs. I just find we get better results when I do have support colonies to boost it up. Because, I mean, obviously, you know, things happen. Queens die, they swarm, whatever. So to me, the Cloake board is the best way to make queen cells. That's the way I like to do it. It's one of many, many, many ways. But you get the awesome ability to start a queen cell response, which triggers a lot of cell production, high quantity. And you're allowed to finish those queen cells with a supersedure response, which is focused purely on quality. So you get the best of both worlds with just one beehive, one queen right beehive that generates its own brood, that generates its own bees. This thing is worth its weight in gold. The first set of grafts you make with this Cloake board, if you were to sell them or even use them yourself to save money, that thing's paid for itself, and then you get years out of it. To me, it's really a great invention. It's my favorite way to make queen cells, and that's how we're going to be doing it this spring. You know, another thing people ask me all the time, and when you buy the Cloake board, they come with these instructions that tell you you're supposed to like rotate the bottom box and seal it off. That way the foragers all get pushed into there. And there is an argument to be made for increased bee population density in that top box, which will help improve the grafts. But we eliminate that process by, you saw like yesterday, by us adding those extra nurse bees. It eliminates the whole rotating thing because it just doesn't really work when you're on full-weight pallets like us. I find it better. You don't need to block the entrance or do anything fancy. It's just all I got to remember to do in the morning is just pull that slide out, and then hopefully this following Friday we'll pull the cells out and put them in the incubator, and that's all there is to it. There's just no need for all those extra steps. It's very, very simple, and I don't know, it's just my favorite way to do it. Well, that's pretty much it. That's really the whole process. The only thing like I said, we'll do in the morning is we'll pull these slides out. One thing I did forget to mention though is that we'll actually check the grafts to see how many got started. If we didn't get enough grafts started before we pull the slides out, we can still regraft in the morning. The way our schedule works is we rebuild the colonies on Saturday, we graft on Sunday, and generally those cells are capped on the following Friday. That's when we'll pull them. But because we rebuild colonies on Saturday, we can still graft a second time on Monday to keep the graft numbers up, and then we can pull those grafts on Saturday, which is fine because that's when we start rebuilding the hives. We have to have the cells out of the cell builders prior to us rebuilding the hives on Saturday. And at a certain point, it's not worth just messing my schedule up. It's a really tight schedule. We have to keep it. So if we get a bad take, even after the second graft on Monday, we just eat it that week, and that's just how it is. Because then if we start grafting again, it throws the whole system out of whack, and I can only get help on the weekends right now, so that's just how it is. But that is a good thing, and the key thing to remember is that with the Cloake boards, if you do want to try to regraft, don't pull those slides out, because then that colony is going to reunite and become queen right, and then you have to put the slide back in, wait at least overnight. You don't have to be 24 hours. I just do it the next day before you can put grafts in again. So just leave the slides in, check your grafts after you put them in the next day. It doesn't have to be 24 hours again. You know, I can wake up first thing in the morning and check them. It doesn't matter. The bees have usually started those cells within a few hours. Honestly, you can usually see them whether they're going to start it or not. And that's the only little thing I forgot to mention. And hopefully, other than that, this is what we're going to be doing every single week, all of spring and probably all of summer, as long as we can. We noticed last year when August came around, we got into a bad pollen and nectar dearth, and the grafts just plummeted. That's when we kind of started shutting down, or we started just doing grafting in the little queenless nuke I made some videos on, you know, months ago. And that did seem to kind of limp us along until September came, and the fall pollen flow allowed us to start grafting heavy again. So I'm expecting us probably to shut down this probably in July. August we probably won't do so much, just because we're going to extract honey in July, and I just don't think you really can graft much of anything in August. Although that could have just been me. I did ask another beekeeper and he was still getting good takes, so probably just something I need to work on, is trying to get through that summer dearth. But that's really it, this little system here. And it took us I don't know what time it is. It's 4 o'clock. We probably started around 11, so 5 hours with 3 people. The first time always takes the longest, so that's kind of it. It's not terrible if you have enough help. It's about a half a day of work. Once the hives come back from California here in the next few weeks, I'll be out taking care of the primary colonies, and my wife and Rachel will be doing all of this by themselves. So we'll just have 2 people. For the 2 of them, it's usually an all-day job Saturday, an all-day job Sunday. But you can do it, and when you kind of factor in the fact of a queen cell being, you know, $4 or $5 a piece, depending on how many you're buying, that's a lot of money if you're getting 500-600 cells a week and you've only got 2 pairs of hands. It's a really productive thing, because even if I can't sell these cells, obviously I'm using 99% of them myself, and that's saving me from having to buy other beekeepers. And if you can turn around and sell them, you can usually pay enough for the labor, for the cost of materials, and you basically just have cells on hand 24/7. And it's a really good process. I always tell people my biggest regret in beekeeping was not learning how to do this day one. I waited years and years to really start grafting heavily. I tinkered with it, but I didn't really invest in it, and I wish I had. We'd be in a much better state. So it's a little daunting for some people trying to get into it, I understand, but man, I would just start. And the beginning of the year in spring, that's the best time to do it, because it's the easiest time to do it. It's the best thing you can do for your beekeeping business. Even if you're not running a beekeeping business, honestly, I still believe the best queen you can ever raise is the queen you raise yourself, right? Because you get to choose whatever traits that you want, and it's just really good. Instead of having to rely on me or other producers, you can really just learn how to do it yourself. Not that I'm trying to undercut the cells. I'm happy to sell them, but I just wanted to show people kind of how we do it, and show that it's not so daunting, and you don't have to have all those weird little tricks and variations that you see on the internet all the time. People go crazy with all kinds of weird little extra things. You really just don't need it. You really just need a hive that's in a queenless state, and you put a larva in there. It doesn't even have to be perfectly 4 days old. They'll still draw that sucker even if it's a little bit older. It happens all the time. The bees are way more flexible, especially at the start of spring, than most people think. And it's way easier to handle the cells than most people think too. If people really saw the whole process, I just kept thinking, you know, hey, they'll do it themselves. Anyways, that's just how we do it. And again, there's 1,000 ways. You don't have to overthink it. And I'm going to get to it. And if we get a good batch, hopefully in the next week or 2, I'm going to start building those mini mating nukes. We still got a lot coming in. I'm building those every night. So we can do that. That way we can have our queens ready to start selling by mid-April. That's the goal. All right. Thanks, guys. I'll get to it. See ya.